Thank you so much for this high honor. I absolutely appreciate it. I'm sure my genes, that's genes with a G right now, are vibrating because I couldn't be closer to my maternal family roots right here. In the late 1700s, a gentleman by the name of John Cox, living in Massachusetts, was flying the Union Jack after the Revolution was over, which was not a very healthy thing to do. He was told, I think on a Wednesday night, that the mob was going to come with the American flag and a rope, and they're going to have him lower the Union Jack, and he was going to stand on it, or they're going to use the rope on the whole family. So on Thursday night, he made his escape with the family all the way up to Minas Basin, which is that the way I'm turned around? we're on Minas Basin right now. And John Cox's grave is at Habitant. And usually I try to make a chance to go and pay my respects to John Cox. The other connection is my mother, a Spring Hill girl. Well, my grandmother is Mary Cox, and she's a Kingsport girl. My mother's grew up in Spring Hill. She didn't actually graduate from Acadia University. There was a finishing school for ladies, I think, here, that girls attended. Why did ladies need finishing? Back when did boys not need finishing? Or were they already finished? At any rate, Mom attended here, and it was a totally different standard. She tells these stories. You were not allowed to speak to a boy at all while you were attending Acadia. But occasionally they had a special event in the gym where the girls would go in a procession in a big circle, and the boys would go on a procession in another circle going the opposite direction. And you could nod to them, but you could not touch and you could not speak. She got into deep trouble one time because a boy passed her a note. I think it was from a guy called Walter. She eventually married Wilbur, who was my father. And now to my address. Since I'm now an octogenarian, I turn 84 on the 24th of May, which, as you might know, is Queen Victoria's birthday. It's also Bob Dylan's birthday. And I think I'm philosophically halfway between Queen Victoria and Bob Dylan, if that's not too much of a stretch. So since I'm an octogenarian, I'm going to hand out advice in all of my remarks. And you just, you can take it or leave it, but I think you'll be happier if you take it, actually. I'm going to start with Mark Twain. Mark Twain said, growing old is a question of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. And that applies to almost everything in life. Actually, if you don't mind, it doesn't matter. It's a very Buddhist point of view. Which leads me to my first piece of advice: don't worry. Don't worry. Mark Twain said, some of the worst things in my life never happened. And so my second piece of advice is procrastinate. Don't procrastinate your work and your duties. I don't want you to be a shirker. Procrastinate worrying. Try it. It might work. As soon as you start to worry, change the subject and procrastinate about worrying. Because some of the worst things in your life may never happen. And worrying does you no good. If you can do something about it, do something about it. Then procrastinate and forget about it. Because worrying just screws up your mind and screws up your insides. And you'll be way better off if you don't worry. The next piece of advice is never, ever, ever harbor resentment. Never harbor resentment. It's like mixing a cup of poison and then drinking it yourself. Because whoever you're resenting couldn't care less. It's just poisoning yourself. Bad idea. Those kinds of thoughts don't help your well-being. And if somebody says, you know, you're being used, say, great, I want to be used. I'd rather be useful than useless. I like what George Bernard Shaw said. He said, when I'm dead and gone, I want to be all used up. And I agree with him. That's what I'm aiming for, too. Being nice and having good manners is a good idea. Being angry and yelling at people is a bad idea. I got these things quite succinctly put. Henry James said that as you mature, a lot of you are already mature, or fairly mature. As you mature, the three most important things are, number one, be kind. Number two, be kind. Number three, be kind. Those are the three most important things you'll learn as you mature. Now I want to quote Oscar Wilde. When he came to North America in the 19th century, he visited Niagara Falls, which is the honeymoon capital. Afterwards, he said, "Surely Niagara Falls must be the second great disappointment in every American marriage." I don't agree with Oscar Wilde about marriage. I sort of agree with him about Niagara Falls, which I'll come to in a minute. I think marriage is a great idea. I've had 2 of them. And having a good companion for life is wonderful, but it can have issues. I've been with, I forgot to mention my third most important thing for being here. I'm trying not to read for my genes vibrating. Is son Alan, my oldest son, is here, lives here with his wife Holly. And Alan and Holly, as many of you know, they live underneath North Mountain near Canning. They're both excellent artists, and their 2 kids are also here, Jack and Lily, who are also excellent in very many ways, but I don't have time to list their ways. And they're sitting with my wonderful wife, Birgit, over there. We've been together, is it 43? I think it's 43 years. So here's some tips if you're going to be with somebody for a long time. Here are a couple of ideas to smooth the way. Limit complaining about the other one to a minimum, or preferably none at all. Don't ever blame. Just forget about blaming. And find something nice to say every day. Some little nice thing to say. You know, I like your shoes, or whatever it is. Every day. I mean it. Amazing how many guys don't do that. I don't know if girls do it. They do it, they're better than guys. Now, turning back to Niagara Falls, it is overrated. From the point of view of aesthetics, it's just basically a long gray rectangle, very boring. If you want to find real beauty, go out and look at a leaf or a bunch of leaves. There's way more excitement in a dead maple leaf than there is in all of Niagara Falls. So I certainly feel that way as a painter. To quote Stephen Fry, there is a moral force to aesthetics. And there's a quote from the movie The Color Purple. Forgive me, I have to say a kind of a naughty word, but I'm actually quoting Whoopi Goldberg from the movie The Color Purple. She said, "You know, I think it pisses God off if you walk by a field of flowers, beautiful flowers, the color purple, and you don't even notice." We don't want to go around pissing God off. Even if you don't believe him, it's not a good idea. So I recommend people spend a lot more time out in nature. Birgit and I go for at least a 40-minute hike every single day. I would now spend a lot less time on electronic screens. So here's 2 prescriptions for happiness. More time spent out in nature, less time on electronic screens. Another quote from a wonderful woman, Georgia O'Keeffe, probably the most famous artist in the world in the early 20th century. She said, "Nobody sees a flower, really. It takes time to see a flower. Like to have a friend takes time." Isn't that a nice thought? So that's what I'm trying to encourage people, kids and families and that sort of thing to do. There's a recent practice in Japan called forest therapy. Stressed office workers, and there's nobody more stressed than office workers in downtown Tokyo. All they do is take a walk in the forest, and there's all kinds of forests all over Japan, even in Tokyo. It's shrines and temples and parks and so on. They just go walking through the forest. There's no other program, and breathe. And sometimes, but I don't have time today, I ask an audience to pause, take 3 breaths, and there's one gentleman's taking a breath right now. Take 3 breaths and think about pine trees. I guarantee you'll feel better. If you're feeling stressed, just take 3 breaths and think, even thinking. Patients in hospital rooms who have a view out the window of a tree get better measurably quicker. Nature is like magic. And now for another aesthetic quote from the aforementioned Oscar. He was asked, "Why is America so violent?" Evidently, America used to be violent in the good old days. He said, I'll tell you why America is so violent. Their wallpaper's so ugly. That's Oscar Wilde. New York Times columnist Art Buchwald said, the best things in life are not things. Best things in life are not things. Things give you a temporary dopamine hit when you go shopping. Helping others leads to happiness. Believe it or not, the happiest profession, I guess in the world, certainly in North America, is a palliative care nurse. They're the happiest people. Albert Schweitzer, that great doctor who dedicated his life to helping lepers in Africa, when he was talking to a graduating class, said, I don't know any of you, but one thing I do know, the only way you'll be truly happy is to be of service to others. And we've heard that already 2 or 3 times this morning. The only way you'll be truly happy is to be of service to others. You are now looking forward to having a lot of fun this evening. I imagine most of you are if you're normal. But do not confuse fun with happiness. They use actually different parts of the brain. Heavy partying type of fun gives temporary dopamine hits, but a steady diet of it leads to disaster. And I'll give you 3 examples of people you may or may not have heard of who have absolutely dedicated their life with fervor to having fun. One is Lindsay Lohan. One is Charlie Sheen. And the other one you may not have heard of, he's the mayor of Toronto. His name's Rob Ford. All of them, they're having fun. And they're having fun, and it led to train wrecks. I think they need help. I'll choose one more quote from Oscar Wilde to close with. He was almost alone on his deathbed in a garret in Paris. He turned his head to the wall and said his last words, either this wallpaper goes or I go. And with that, he went. With that, I too shall go. Thank you very much for the honor.